I never imagined my own daughter would one day become a stranger to me, someone who could look into my eyes and speak words that sliced deeper than any knife. I am 50 years old now, a woman who has lived through storms, scraped her hands raw on the walls of survival, and built a life out of the smallest fragments of hope. And yet nothing, no pain, no hunger, no sleepless night could have prepared me for the betrayal that came from the very child I once carried against my heart. Her name is Emily. She was the light of my youth, born when I was barely 20, and still unsure of who I was or what the world demanded of me. Her father was already fading from my life by then, a man who liked to play the part of a provider, but ran when responsibility weighed heavier than his pride. I raised her alone. Every diaper, every school lunch, every tear wiped from her cheek bore the fingerprints of my hands. I worked nights at a diner, mornings cleaning houses, afternoons folding clothes in a laundry service. I told myself each ache in my back, each crack in my skin was worth it because I was building her future. When she wanted dance lessons, I gave up meals so she could have them. When she dreamed of college, I emptied the last of my savings, convincing myself that if she had wings, maybe she could fly far from the cage I'd been trapped in. For years, I thought she understood. She hugged me tightly on the nights I fell asleep at the table, whispered, "Thank you, Mom," when I surprised her with new shoes I couldn't afford, and promised me that one day she would repay every sacrifice. I clung to those promises like lifelines. They made the struggle bearable. But somewhere along the way, Emily slipped into another world, one where wealth was worshipped. Appearances mattered more than loyalty, and I, her mother, became a burden she was eager to shed. It all came to light at her wedding. The setting was beautiful, almost painfully so. A beach at golden hour, the waves lapping gently against the shore, the sky painted in hues of lavender and rose. Guests arrived in gowns that shimmered tuxedos pressed sharp enough to cut. Champagne flowed, photographers circled, and the air smelled of orchids and expensive perfume. Everything screamed perfection. And yet I felt like a stain on the fabric of that perfection tucked away at the far end of the rose, as if my presence was an inconvenience rather than an honor. From the beginning, I sensed something was wrong. Emily's eyes, once warm, barely lingered on me. She was radiant in her dress, but her smile carried no softness when it met mine. Instead, she looked past me as though ashamed of the woman who had given her life. I tried to shake it off, telling myself weddings are stressful, that she was caught in the whirlwind of details and nerves, but deep down a knot had already formed in my stomach. Then came the conversation that would tear my world apart. It happened hours before the ceremony, in a private cabana, where she and her fiancé Daniel summoned me. I thought they wanted a blessing, perhaps a final embrace before vows bound them together. Instead, they sat across from me, faces calm, almost rehearsed, as if they had practiced this cruelty until it rolled smoothly off their tongues. "Mom." Emily began, her voice clipped, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "There's something important we need to discuss before the wedding starts." Daniel leaned forward, his smile polite but cold, the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We're building a future together," he said, "and to do that we need support. We need people who truly want us to succeed, which brings us to you." I frowned, confusion prickling. Emily sighed as though the weight of me had already tired her. "We've decided that if you want to be part of our lives after today, you need to contribute $50,000, otherwise—" Her words trailed, but the implication was louder than any thunder. I blinked, certain I had misheard. "50,000!" My voice cracked, disbelief strangling it. "Emily, you know I don't have that kind of money. I've spent everything for you, for this day, for your education, for—" "Exactly," Daniel interrupted smoothly. "You've spent. But now it's time to invest in the future. Our future." I looked at my daughter, searching for some flicker of hesitation, some crack in her resolve that might tell me this was a mistake, but her gaze was steady, cold, alien. "If you can't," she said quietly, "then it might be better if we move on without you." The words struck like a blade, twisting through every memory of lullabies sung in the dark, scraped knees, kissed, whispered promises of forever. My own daughter was cutting me out, not because I failed to love her, but because I couldn't buy her. I sat there, numb, the sound of the ocean mocking me with its calm rhythm, while my heart shattered. My throat burned with words I couldn't form. My hands trembled against the cheap fabric of my dress. They expected me to beg, to break, to crawl. They expected me to surrender the dignity I had spent 50 years clawing from the jaws of life. But instead I smiled. It was small, faint, the kind of smile that doesn't reveal its meaning. Emily frowned at it. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. But I said nothing more. I rose, nodded, and left the cabana, letting the door close softly behind me. Inside, a storm raged. Anger surged through me, hotter than fire, colder than ice. Betrayal from a lover is brutal, but betrayal from your child. It redefines the word. It shakes the very core of who you are, makes you question every choice, every sacrifice. I had given her my youth, my health, my dreams. And in return, she handed me an ultimatum wrapped in cruelty. But as I walked back toward the ceremony, my heels sinking into the sand, I realized something they had forgotten. They thought I was powerless. They thought $50,000 was beyond me, and in a way they were right, I didn't have that money. But I had something far more dangerous. I had knowledge, I had patience, and most of all, I had the truth. And the truth, when revealed at the right moment, is worth more than any fortune. That night, as the guests gathered and the music swelled, I sat quietly in the back row, hands folded in my lap, my smile still faint, still unreadable. Emily and Daniel believed they had won, that I would stay silent, humiliated, erased. They didn't know the storm that was coming. I didn't cry after I left the cabana. It would have been easier if I had that familiar cleansing ache behind the ribs, the tightness loosening at last. But instead, the tears retreated, and something colder rose to the surface, a deliberate glacial calm that made each breath precise. I walked the length of the boardwalk in small, quiet steps, the kind you take when a child is sleeping, and you want to lay the world down without waking it. The ocean rolled in and out, as if indifferent to my humiliation. It has always been indifferent. It is the way it survives. When I reached the edge of the ceremony site, I paused beside the florist's tent. Buckets of white roses stood like small galaxies, their petals cool with mist. The florist, a young woman with sun-freckled arms, glanced up and smiled. Then she looked closer, and her face gentled in that way people's faces do when they recognize pain they cannot name. "Do you like the gardenias?" she asked softly. "Your daughter requested them this morning." "My daughter," I repeated, as if I'd been asked the name of a country I once lived in and left without a forwarding address. The florist nodded, still waiting, and I realized I'd been staring at the flowers as if they could answer for their perfumed perfection. "They're beautiful," I said, and my voice did not crack. I had learned long ago to put a steady tone between myself and an unsteady world. In the storage tent, the wedding planner had arranged like a command center. Lists were clipped to a corkboard, deposits marked in tidy highlighter stripes, my handwriting on many of them. The truth is, I had paid for more than Emily remembered, or allowed herself to remember. The venue deposit, the dress alterations Emily preferred to forget when she spoke about paying everything herself. The generator rental because the island's power was moody, and I knew my daughter's temper was worse. For months, I had slipped payments in quietly, the way a person tucks love notes into a pocket they hope their child will discover later, surprised, softened. I lifted one corner of the clipboard and saw a copy of the beach event permit with my name typed bold as the applicant. I had been the one who secured it during a winter storm, when the office was open and the island was nearly empty. I remembered standing at the counter with my hair wet, under my hood fingers aching, thinking I will get this for her, so she won't have to fight one more thing. I had not realized I was sparing my daughter from the single fight that might have taught her which battles matter. I took a photograph of the permit on my phone. It felt petty as I did it, and practical and merciful all at once. Revenge is like that, a braid of instincts, some noble, some not, all twined into the rope you hold when you climb out of what tried to drown you. Back at the small room the hotel had given me as a mother of the bride concession, I shut the door and locked it, then sat at the edge of the bed with my hands on my knees and listened to the muffled sounds of a wedding assembling itself without me. The thin wall hummed with laughter, Cutlery clinked somewhere too close. I could hear the DJ testing the mic with a cheerful check that made my teeth ache. I set my phone on the bedspread, opened the voice recorder, and pressed play. Their voices filled the room again, the polite cruelty of Daniel's well-practiced cadence, the new cool in Emily's. I had tapped record when they'd settled into their lines in that cabana without quite knowing why. Now the habit felt prophetic. Their ultimatum sat in the air like a stone, 50,000 or nothing. I listened to it twice, and then a third time until my own breathing in the background sounded less like panic and more like witness. I emailed the file to myself. Then I emailed it to a friend whose checkbook I had never borrowed, but whose moral compass had steadied me more than once. Her name is Carla. She runs the thrift shop on Main where my old uniforms went after I finally left the diner. Years ago, she'd pressed $10 into my hand and said, "Pride is expensive, honey, and it never gives change. We don't talk every day, but when we do, it is the kind of talking that sets a shoulder back into its socket." I typed only, "If I am lying to myself, tell me." Then I hit send. I hit. The hotel bathroom mirror is merciless in its fluorescent honesty. I stood in front of it, hands braced, and thought of my mother. She had taught me to scrub a stove until the chrome shone like something on television, to fold sheets with crisp edges, even when the mattress was secondhand, to smile at landlords, even when they looked me over like I was a stain. She had also taught me something she never meant to teach, that a woman can make herself so useful she disappears. I had sworn, holding Emily in the dark all those years ago, that I would be half usefulness and half flame, that I would not vanish inside my own devotion. Somewhere between dance lessons and FAFSA forms and the night the car died in the grocery store lot, I lost the flame and kept the usefulness. It is a way to live. It is not a way to survive betrayal. I washed my face, reapplied the lipstick Emily said was a little too bright for the photos, and put on the shoes that pinched my right toe because the other pair looked dated. I touched the small locket at my throat, a cheap silver oval I'd bought at a flea market the year Emily was 10, and too much in love with a high-end brand magazine. Inside was a picture of her, with a front tooth missing grin, wide eyes trusting. I closed it quickly and slid the chain under my dress. There are some versions of a person you cannot look at when you are marching toward war. On my way out, my phone buzzed. Carla. Her reply was one sentence: "You owe them nothing except the truth. People say the truth will set you free. They do not say that first it will require you to assemble it like a meal from what you find in the pantry, some facts tired and dented, some fresh, some you'd forgotten you had." I began to gather. I called the bridal boutique and asked to confirm the account details for a final invoice. "This is her mother," I said in the voice that had convinced more than one manager to check the back room again. "I'm the authorized payer." The woman put me on hold, came back, and read me the totals. My name was there under card used twice. I asked for a copy emailed for my records. She obliged. I walked to the venue office, a small building near the dunes, and asked the coordinator to go over the service charges again because I worried they might try to bill my daughter twice. He frowned down at the computer and then printed the ledger for me, unbothered by the fact that I was just the mom. I thanked him and left the paper crinkling in my sweating hand. 3 more of my payments blinked up at me from the neat columns like quiet witnesses. I checked the permit again. The wording mattered in a way I hadn't expected. Permits can be rescinded if conditions are violated. Like, say, if a private event excluded the named permit holder, or if a fire lane was blocked by a band's truck, both things I could truthfully claim were happening now. I did not want to ruin the ceremony. The girl with the missing front tooth still lives in the body of the woman who made me choose between money and motherhood. But I needed leverage, something to put in my pocket, so I didn't have to reach for rage when the time came. Next, I did what every person who has learned to survive does, when everything feels slippery. I made a list. Not on paper, on skin. I wrote a small number inside my wrist in ballpoint: 1, record; 2, receipts; 3, permit; 4, witness. The last item felt the riskiest and the most necessary. Liars do not fear documents as much as they fear other people's eyes on the truth. The witness I chose was a quiet man named Miguel who worked the hotel's night shift security. I had known him for years without ever knowing his last name. He had once walked me to my car when my shift ended after midnight, and a group of drunk men became a single unkind intention. He stopped now near the loading dock, and when I asked him if he could swing by the reception hall after the ceremony and just be there, he nodded without questions and tapped his chest twice, as if to say, "I will stand where you need me." People assume revenge requires noise. Often it requires only precision. I did not scream. I did not throw anything. I sat through the ceremony. When Emily walked down the aisle, she was as beautiful as all the beauty she preferred to imagine I had never given her. Her dress floated around her ankles, catching the salt breeze. Daniel's smile was a politician's practiced humble empty. The officiant spoke words that are supposed to be a spell, and I felt the spell break over me like a wave that realizes it will never reach the shore because the shore has moved. At the reception, I found my place card at a table near the kitchen doors. The card had my name spelled correctly for the first time in 3 iterations of seating charts. It would have felt kind if I hadn't been placed beneath the speaker that buzzed just slightly, a human fly, inside a mechanical throat, making every toast distort. I took a sip of water and watched my daughter twirl. Her laughter had a new edge, sharp as glass polished by the sea. Halfway through the evening, the wedding planner took the microphone to thank the generous sponsors who had made the event possible. She named Daniel's parents who stood and bowed, young royal smug. She named a local vendor who had given a discount for publicity. She did not name me. My body leaned forward, as if toward a cliff, then leaned back. Let it be, I told the old part of me that needed other people to admit what I had spent. The truth I was building did not require applause, it required timing. The timing came when Daniel raised his glass for a special announcement. The room quieted with the kind of anticipatory warmth people like him mistake for love. He thanked everyone for investing in their future, and the word hit me wrong, way up now that I knew what he thought of the people he used. Emily stood beside him, her hand on his arm, eyes bright with a glitter that might have been joy or might have been a reflection of the chandeliers. I stood. My chair scraped the floor with a sound that turned 3 heads, then 10, then all. I did not raise my voice to get the room. Women like me rarely have to. We've learned to stand still in a way that makes a space notice itself. "I won't take long," I said, and my voice carried just fine. "I only want to offer a blessing." Emily's mouth softened in relief, surprised. Daniel smiled his optics-friendly smile. The planner exhaled the breath of a person whose night just became manageable again. I walked to the DJ and held up my phone. "Press play when I lift my hand," I said. He hesitated, then saw Miguel at the back, arms crossed, and nodded. I took the microphone from its stand. The room smelled like salt and sugar and a little like panic. "You asked me for $50,000 today," I began, and the sound system held the words with terrible clarity. "You told me I could buy my place in your life, or I could be nothing." Emily's face blanched, then hardened. Daniel's smile froze. People turned in their chairs the way birds turn mid-flight, not a ruffle wasted. "I am not here to shame you," I continued. "I am here to put the truth in the air where it belongs." I lifted my hand. The recording began. My daughter's voice. My future son-in-law's voice. The ultimatum spoken inside that pretty cabana, with the fan turning lazily above our small, ugly moment. The room changed temperature. It is a thing you can feel if you have spent your life reading whether others pretend is internal. Gasps broke open at the edges. Someone said, "No," in a way that was not a question. When the clip ended, no one clapped. Good. Truth is not entertainment. It is a mirror. I held it up and looked into it with them. "I cannot give you $50,000, I said. "But I can give you the receipts for what I have already paid. And I can give you back your cruelty wrapped in its proper name." I lifted the ledger copies, the boutique emails, the permit with my name, and set them on the sweetheart table the way a mother sets down food for a child who has insisted she is starving. Emily's jaw trembled. For a flicker of a second, the old girl inside her pressed a hand to the glass of my daughter's polished face, pleading. Then Daniel leaned close, said something I couldn't hear, and the flicker died. The planner rushed toward me. Miguel moved a half step forward. The DJ muted his track. I smiled a small, faint, unreadable smile that belonged to this particular evening and to 1,000 nights before it. There was one more thing, and it sat at the edge of my tongue like a tide that knows exactly when to turn. Because the truth I had held back until now was not about money or even about manners. It was about the wound behind all this theater. The letter I had found folded in the bottom of a box the week before my mother's cramped handwriting across the front. For Emily when she is kind enough to listen. I had not read it to anyone. I had barely allowed myself to read it twice, but I would read it now, not its contents, its existence. It was time to show my daughter that betrayal is an inheritance if no one interrupts it. I touched the locket under my dress, found it with my fingertips, and felt its oval warmth like a living thing. Then I lifted my head to meet the room that had tried to make me shame-proof. I came here ready to bless your marriage, I said quietly. Instead, I will bless myself with honesty. What you asked me for the price of belonging is the same price my own mother paid to keep the peace with people who fed on her silence. I won't pay it. Not for you. Not for anyone. Not anymore. The ocean roared suddenly louder as if it had remembered me. I set the microphone back in its cradle. I folded the ledger and the emails and the permit into my purse. Then I thanked the planner for the gardenias, nodded to the DJ, and walked off the dance floor without looking back. Sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do at a party she paid for is to leave. Outside, the sky had tilted into that soft indigo that makes everything look honest and a little larger than itself. I let the wind lift the hem of my dress and listened for the old impulse in me that always wanted to apologize when I had done nothing wrong. It didn't speak. In its place, there was a silence that felt like rest after a long fever. But the night wasn't finished. I would not be done simply with a recording and a refusal. There were debts here that were not money. There were secrets in this family that were older than my daughter's cruelty, large enough to make a man like Daniel look small. They were folded into the letter in my bag and into a story I had not told anyone, because I thought it would unmake me. I stood under the wedding arch for a moment, fabric drifting in the sea breeze like a veil, trying to remember what it was for, and I promised myself I would open that letter before the sun rose. I promised myself I would read it to the one person who could still change me. And then when it was time, if the words belonged to my daughter too, I would hand them to her like a mirror and see if anything still living inside her would reach toward its own reflection. For now, I walked to the edge of the water and let the foam cool my ankles. Behind me, the music stuttered and started again because people are practiced in pretending nothing has happened. In front of me, the horizon held its line with the stubbornness I have finally learned. The room behind me buzzed with fragments of chatter. The laughter of cousins clinging too tightly to champagne glasses, the steady rhythm of forks on porcelain. I had slipped outside into the corridor, and for the first time that night, I let my shoulders drop away from the perfect posture I had forced them into. The ocean's echo still hummed in my ears. It was strange how even after detonating a truth in front of everyone, I felt a quiet steadiness more than chaos. I leaned against the wall and closed my eyes, breathing in the faint scent of salt mixed with perfume that clung to my dress. I thought of Emily, my daughter spinning in that gown, her smile painted in colors that weren't entirely hers. I thought of Daniel beside her hand, heavy on her arm, like a shackle disguised as affection. My stomach tightened, not with rage this time, but with grief. Grief for the girl who used to crawl into my bed at midnight, whispering secrets. Only I was allowed to keep grief for the mother I used to be, who believed that love could shield us both from everything ugly. I wanted to leave to walk down the boardwalk until the hotel lights shrank into pinpricks. But something in me knew the night wasn't finished. Revenge is not a single act, it is a story you decide to tell, and I hadn't told mine to the end. The locket at my throat pressed against my skin, as if reminding me of what still lay folded in my purse, my mother's letter. The words I had barely dared to read. The inheritance of pain and warning passed down through women who had been silenced too long. I slipped into the bridal suite quiet as shadow. The air was thick with perfume, discarded heels, and laughter recorded on a phone somewhere. Emily wasn't there yet. On the vanity lay her makeup bag. its zipper half open, spilling brushes like tired soldiers. I touched one bristle and thought, how fragile it all is, the armor we paint on to face the world. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled the envelope from my purse. The handwriting was shaky but familiar, my mother's script all loops and slants. I opened it, and the paper trembled in my hands, though I willed them to stillness. Her words spilled into me like salt water, in a wound stinging, cleansing, undeniable. She wrote of the husband who had broken her spirit with debts and disdain. She wrote of her silence, how it turned her into a ghost inside her own house. And she warned me as if she had foreseen my life. Do not let anyone make you pay for belonging. Love that demands a price is not love. It is a cage. Break it before it breaks you. I had carried that letter like a relic, too afraid to expose it. Tonight, though, it felt like a weapon, but not the kind that destroyed. A weapon that revealed. I folded it carefully and placed it back, then heard voices approaching the door. Emily's laugh, Daniel's lower growl of words both drunk on champagne and arrogance. I tucked the envelope away just as the door swung open. They entered and the sight of me startled them both. Emily's smile faltered, Daniel's eyes narrowed. I stood before they could speak. You should read this someday, I said to Emily, my hand on my purse. She frowned, impatient, defensive, but I didn't push it further. I simply walked past them, my heels tapping like punctuation marks. Downstairs, the reception swirled on the guests, pretending they hadn't witnessed the fracture of a family. But Miguel caught my eye from the back corner. He gave a single nod, steady like a lighthouse beam, reminding a ship it wasn't alone. For the first time that day, I let myself smile, not out of defiance, not out of victory, but out of relief. Because the story wasn't just about money or betrayal anymore. It was about breaking the silence that had lived in my family for generations. It was about refusing to vanish into usefulness like my mother had. It was about reclaiming myself even if it meant losing the daughter I thought I had. As I stepped out into the night air, the sea breeze lifted my hair and the horizon stretched open like a promise I had almost forgotten existed. The war inside the ballroom could continue, but I was done playing their roles. My revenge was not the chaos they expected, it was the truth and the freedom that truth gave me. The ocean stretched before me like a dark mirror, waves folding and unfolding as if nothing inside the ballroom had ever happened. I stood at the edge of the sand, letting the hem of my dress brush against the tide, the salt air clinging to my lips. Somewhere behind me, music pulsed, laughter rose and fell. Glasses clinked and the facade of celebration carried on. But I knew that for Emily and Daniel the night had already shifted. The cracks I had opened in their perfect painting would only spread, and I wasn't finished. I walked back slowly, each step sinking into the sand, as though the earth itself wanted me to pause, to reflect on the enormity of what had just unfolded. The memories pressed in Emily's first recital when she ran to me in her tutu, cheeks flushed with joy. The nights I sewed patches onto her clothes by lamplight. The mornings I left early so she wouldn't see the hunger in my eyes because I had skipped dinner to make sure she ate. Every thread of her life was stitched with pieces of me. And now she had tried to cut me out as though the fabric of her being could exist without the woman who had bled for it. When I returned to the edge of the reception, I didn't step back inside. Instead, I lingered by the French doors hidden in the shadows and watched. Emily twirled on the dance floor, her laughter too loud, her smile too wide, performances for the guests who whispered behind manicured hands. Daniel's arm was tight around her waist, his jaw clenched, though he grinned for the cameras. They were holding the mask together, terrified it might shatter. I saw it then, fear. Not mine, but theirs. Fear that I had a card left to play, fear that the storm wasn't over. And they were right, because revenge is not always about a single blow. Sometimes it is the slow unraveling, the steady reminder that truth is stronger than lies, and I had the truth. I turned away from the sight of them back into the corridor, where a few staff hurried with trays, ignoring me. In my purse, the letter from my mother pressed like a heartbeat. Those words, "Do not let anyone make you pay for belonging," echoed so loudly I thought they might leap from my lips. That letter was my anchor, my inheritance of survival. I found Miguel again near the service entrance, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp. He had been the only one to catch my gaze earlier to recognize what was really happening beneath the glitter. He leaned closer when I approached. "They didn't see it coming," he said softly, his voice roughened by years of sea air. I shook my head, my lips curving into the faintest smile. "They thought I was weak. They forgot who raised Emily." He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "So what's next?" What was next? That was the question. I had exposed their cruelty to the family, shattered the illusion of perfection. But part of me burned for more. I wanted Daniel to feel the ground collapse beneath him, wanted Emily to see the cost of aligning herself with arrogance and greed. And yet another part of me, tired, bruised, older than the years I carried, wondered if walking away was the truest revenge of all. Inside, applause rose as the cake was wheeled in tiers of white buttercream adorned with sugar roses. I imagined Emily's hand cutting into it, Daniel's palm pressing hers, the symbol of a unity already rotting. The guests cheered, but I could see the tension in their shoulders, the questions in their glances. Whispers would follow them long after the candles burned out. I stepped outside again, this time onto the boardwalk, where the night stretched open quiet, except for the tide. My heels clicked against the wood, each sound steady, measured. With each step I felt lighter, not because the pain had vanished, but because I had stopped carrying their weight. The truth was, I had spent years preparing Emily for a world that would devour her if she wasn't careful. I thought I had taught her resilience, empathy, loyalty. Instead, she had chosen a man who mirrored the very abandonment I had once suffered. It broke me, yes, but it also freed me, because now I could see that not every battle is about saving someone else. Some battles are about saving yourself. I paused at the end of the boardwalk and turned back, the reception lights glowing warm against the night. Somewhere inside, Emily danced, Daniel schemed, and the whispers grew louder. Somewhere inside, a mother's absence was beginning to settle like a shadow across the room. And for the first time in years, I let myself breathe, not as a mother desperate to belong, not as a woman begging for scraps of love, but as myself, whole, scarred, unbroken. This wasn't the end of the story. No, it was only the beginning. The sea wind tangled in my hair as I stood at the end of the boardwalk, staring back at the glowing ballroom where my daughter's wedding unfolded like a carefully staged play. I could almost hear the rehearsed laughter, the clinking glasses, the hollow toasts. It looked like joy, but I knew better. Beneath the polished surface, cracks had already begun to spread, cracks I had carved with my own steady hands. For a moment, guilt swept over me, sharp and sudden. This was Emily's wedding day, the day she had once dreamed of as a little girl, twirling in front of my mirror in a bedsheet veil. I had imagined standing proudly by her side, my heart swelling as I watched her step into a new life. Instead, I stood in the shadows, the air heavy with betrayal. I asked myself if I had gone too far, if perhaps silence would have been kinder. But then I remembered her eyes, cold, rehearsed, stripped of daughterly warmth, as she demanded $50,000 from me, as if love had a price tag. That memory burned away my guilt, leaving only steel. I began walking again, my heels steady against the wood of the boardwalk, each step echoing like a heartbeat in the quiet night. I passed clusters of guests sneaking outside for air or for secrets of their own. Some glanced at me, their eyes sliding away quickly, embarrassed by what they had witnessed earlier. Others nodded stiffly, sympathy dancing on their faces, but no courage in their voices. That was fine. I didn't need their pity. As I neared the parking lot, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned slightly and saw Miguel, broad-shouldered, weathered by the sea, the only one that night who had looked at me without judgment. His presence was both unexpected and oddly comforting. "You're leaving?" he asked, his voice low, careful. I shook my head, "Not yet." He studied me in silence, then offered a small smile. "You're stronger than they know." His words lingered long after he left me alone again. Stronger than they know. Yes, perhaps that was the truth. I walked back towards the beach, not the ballroom. The ocean roared softly, patient and eternal, and I let the tide lap against my shoes. I thought of my mother's letter once more, its words like a lantern inside my chest. "Do not let anyone make you pay for belonging." Those words were not just a warning, they were a map. My mother had been silenced by shame, but she had left me the key to break the chain. I stood there for a long while letting the truth settle. Emily had chosen Daniel and his wealth over me, and perhaps nothing I did would change her. But revenge is not always about destroying someone else. Sometimes it is about refusing to be destroyed. When I finally turned back toward the ballroom, it was with new eyes. I saw not a celebration, but a cage decorated with flowers. Daniel preened for the guests, his laugh too loud, his arm gripping Emily like a possession. She played her part, smiling brightly, but I recognized the flicker of doubt behind her eyes. Maybe she was beginning to realize the cost of her choices. Maybe not. Either way, the seed was planted. As the night deepened, I slipped inside, quietly unnoticed. I didn't need the spotlight anymore. My revenge had already begun, not in the form of shouting or scenes, but in truth, spoken at the right moment in dignity, reclaimed in the whispers that would follow them long after the last song ended. I sat at the edge of the room, calm, unshaken, watching as the facade trembled. For the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. I felt powerful. Because sometimes revenge isn't about tearing others down. Sometimes it's about standing tall in the ruins they tried to bury you in and smiling as you walk away free. The night stretched thin. The stars scattered like broken glass across the sky, as if even heaven wanted to witness what had transpired inside that glittering ballroom. I sat quietly at the edge of the reception, my back straight, my hands folded neatly in my lap. Around me, the guests tried to keep the celebration alive, their laughter sounding brittle, their conversations punctured with stolen glances in my direction. They couldn't erase what they had seen. They couldn't unhear the tremor in Emily's voice, or the way Daniel's mask had slipped when I refused to bend. Emily floated across the room like a porcelain doll wound too tightly, her smile never reaching her eyes. She leaned against Daniel, but I noticed the way her shoulders tensed every time his grip tightened, the way her gaze flickered to me as if searching for something, anger, forgiveness, maybe even love. But I gave her nothing. My silence was louder than any outburst could have been. Inside me there was a storm. Anger crackled at the edges, grief churned deep in the center, but above it all was a strange clarity. I understood now that revenge wasn't always the grand gesture, the dramatic reveal. Sometimes it was the quiet refusal to be broken. Sometimes it was letting others destroy themselves with the weight of their own choices. As the band struck up another song, I rose from my chair and slipped out into the corridor. The air outside was cooler, softer, carrying the faint scent of salt and orchids. My heels echoed on the tile, each step deliberate. At the far end of the hall, I stopped before a large mirror framed in gold. For the first time that night, I looked at myself. Really looked. A middle-aged woman with lines carved deep from years of sacrifice, eyes shadowed with loss, lips pressed tight with secrets. But behind all of that, I saw something else, something fiercer. I saw survival. I saw strength. I saw a woman who had walked through fire and come out tempered, not destroyed. I lifted my chin, the faintest smile tugging at my mouth. They thought they could humiliate me. They thought they could erase me. But here I was, unbroken, staring myself down and seeing the truth. I didn't need their acceptance. I didn't need their love if it came with conditions. I had myself, and that was enough. As I turned from the mirror, I felt lighter. The burden of years of sacrifice, unthanked of love, unrewarded of loyalty betrayed, seemed to loosen from my shoulders. Emily and Daniel could play their roles for the crowd, but the truth was already unraveling their perfect image. The whispers would follow them, the doubt would seep into their nights, and the choices they had made would haunt them far longer than I ever could. I stepped back outside to the boardwalk where the sea stretched vast and endless. The breeze kissed my skin cool and forgiving, and I breathed deeply. For the first time in years, I felt free. Free from expectation, free from manipulation, free from the illusion that love must always mean sacrifice. I thought of my mother again, her letter burning in my purse like a second heart. She had warned me not to pay for belonging, and tonight I had finally honored her words. I had broken the chain. Behind me, music and laughter carried faintly from the ballroom, but it no longer mattered. That was their world, not mine. My story was no longer about being the mother erased in the corner. My story was about standing tall in the shadows and realizing the shadows were mine to command. I smiled to myself, the waves lapping gently at the shore, and whispered into the night, "It's over." But deep down, I knew this was not an ending, it was a beginning. Because sometimes revenge is not about fire and fury, it is about walking away with dignity, leaving behind the ruins of those who tried to bury you. And as I walked into the night, each step steadier than the last, I knew the lesson would linger, not just for me, but for everyone who had watched. To all the mothers, the daughters, the women who had been silenced, I carried their voices with me. And I vowed never to be silenced again. And so I leave you with this: if you have ever been betrayed, humiliated, or cast aside, remember that your strength does not come from their acceptance. It comes from your survival. It comes from your truth. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched you, if it reminded you of your own battles and your own strength, please like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget to leave a comment. I want to hear your stories too, because none of us should carry our pain alone.